and welcome to art class. We're so happy that you decided to join us today. I hope that it is nice and sunny and warm where you are, because it's not where we are. But here in Toronto, we're just grateful for every day, whether it's snow, rain, or shine, or snow, or snow. But yeah, so we're just happy that you decided to join us today. We're going to have some fun. We're going to be trying out an original art painting, acrylics art, for those of you who are joining us for the first time. I just want to say hi to all the TLC Arts and Skills members, class members. Thank you guys for joining us today, and I hope that you will be painting along with us. And if you are just discovering us for the first time, my name is Nicole Georges Bennett, and today is my co-host,
Dominique Bennett.
And she will be reading the word for us, bringing our devotional, because we always like to tie in our art project to a devotional, because we are all about developing the talents that the Lord has blessed us with and using our art skills as a form of worship. So if you have never ever picked up a paintbrush before and you are feeling a bit intimidated by the thought or the process, I just want to assure you that we are not art experts by any means. We are just art lovers and art enthusiasts, and this is more of an art appreciation class as versus an art tutorial. So we are going to get started because we've got a big project today and we want to jump right in. But first, we always want to start by giving praise to the Lord. So I'm going to ask Dominique to read our devotional. But before we do that, I just want to tell you a little bit about what our art project is going to be today. And we will be doing a picture of a cross on sort of a hillside or the side of a plain against a blue sky with clouds. Yes, clouds. So we wanted to focus on the cross because the cross is at the center of everything that we do. Everything that we do is about the Lord, is about serving the Lord, and about being his child, being his servants. And even though the cross is perhaps an image that is most closely associated with Easter, and we're not quite there yet, I really felt that the Holy Spirit was calling us back to the cross, back to our first love, the original message of Christ's death and resurrection for our salvation. And that is what we wanted to focus today, not so much on the cross in terms of the Easter story, but the cross as a symbol of life. And that's where our devotional is going to be on today as well. And it comes to us, I think it's from Crosswalk, if I remember correctly. Yep. So Crosswalk Devotionals, and it's called Living the Cross Life.
All right, so the scripture is from Mark 8:34 to 35, and it says, "Whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves and take up their cross and follow me." Jesus' call is not what many think. We all have our crosses to bear. People sometimes say, when trying to explain someone's personal struggles, everyone has challenges of some sort, but the cross bearing has to do with submission to Christ. This teaching is not extremely popular as the church tries to attract people to Jesus. Marketing methods tell us to make the church appealing, but bearing a cross for Jesus' sake doesn't sound attractive. Jesus, however, challenged his followers to bear their own crosses daily in sacrificial service to God's kingdom. Richard Foster, I think, calls this the cross life, willing submission and voluntary servanthood to Christ. Jesus asked his disciples to go where they'd rather not go, beyond their personal comfort zones. For example, he had a fisherman disciple take him in their boat across the Sea of Galilee through the storms. Though the storms could be expected, they submitted and they paid a price. But in the end, they gained much greater faith. Living the cross life is challenging, but not complicated. Submission means, of course, loving God and our neighbors, caring for the needy, and living God's way. We are also called to use our talents, gifts, and interests in His service. There are many ways to submit to Jesus. Have you taken up your cross?
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Dominique, for that. So what we're going to do now is we're going to change our shot up a little bit so that you'll be able to see what we're doing. And there was something she read that really stuck out to me. And it talks about us using our talents, gifts, and interests in the service of the Lord. And that is what we are all about. And I think that it's wonderful that as we paint this cross, that we can reflect on how we can use our talents and our gifts for the Lord and for His service, for His kingdom building. All right, stick around, folks. We'll be right back. We're going to have some music playing in the background for a bit, but I will explain the steps as we go through them. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to paint our background. We're going to use our cross stencil, which was made by our teacher Joan, my art partner. Hi, teacher Joan. And she's so talented. She knows how challenging it is for me to do straight lines, so she made a cross stencil for me. Bless you. And so we're going to use our cross stencil against our background, and we're going to paint our sky. I think sort of a summery blue. I think we could all use a shot of blue. The cross, I'm not a big fan of decorating the cross. I think the cross is a symbol that I try to keep it as close to the original cross, the wood grain of the cross. I think we don't want to lose sight of the cross as a place of torment and a place of suffering. And I think when we start beautifying the cross, we lose sight of what Jesus went through for us. So we're going to try to keep the cross as close to the wood grain as we can. And where we will have little pops of color and light will be flowers and in our sky and hopefully in our white fluffy clouds. So we're going to get into it right in a moment. Stick around. So you're not going to see too much of our faces, but the first thing we're going to do is paint our sky and our green base. Hopefully this is not blocking you too much. It just occurred to me. I might back this up a little bit. Just hopefully you can still see our full canvas. Let me just double check that. Yep, we're good. So yeah, so we're gonna do a green, what should I call this, horizon line, just about an inch from our cross stencil. So of course, if TLC, if you have your cross stencils from last year, hang on to them. I'm sure we're gonna come up with lots of ideas for using them again. But in the meantime, if you don't have a cross stencil, of course you can just sort of freehand or use a ruler and draw your cross. We're not going to put the entire cross. We're just doing sort of a 3/4 view. So there will be a little bit of the cross sort of jutting out from the edge of our canvas and will not be visible as part of our painting. But we want enough of our cross on our canvas so that it's obvious that it is a cross. We are going to start painting our sky. For our sky, as I said, we want a nice sort of aquamarine and kind of a summer day. And to do that, you'll mix the same colors that you would for your sea, which would be blue, white, and a tiny, tiny touch of yellow. Too much yellow, you're going to end up with green, and nobody wants to see a green sky. It's also good not to have your paints dry up on you. Alrighty. So as I said, and then that's just the tiniest tip of yellow. The color that you're looking for is closer to an aquamarine or a turquoise. You do not want green. And there we go, just a drop. Now, of course, if you wanted to do a darker shade of blue, you can. And to do that, you would just leave out the yellow and you can just have a blue sky. If you want to have a night sky, you can go with an even darker shade of blue. But it will be, your cross then would have to be a light color in order to show up. So we're going to use our biggest brushes. Or would you prefer something like this? We're going to just dab a little bit in our water. We're going to mix our colors. We need to add a little bit of white to this. It's a little too dark for the color that we're looking for. Good stiff. So. All of our paints have gotten, because today's a super cold day, so they're not as runny as they usually are. Careful with your clothes there. Okay, that looks good. Thank you. Dominique saves the day. She's such a handy helper. Alright, so now we've got a nice light color, a light shade. So she is going to do the painting over of the cross, and basically you're just going to do it like this. And I will tackle the rest of the stuff. Where's that brush I gave you? Rather than having sort of like that white border, and it gives your painting continuity. Beautiful shade. Painting can be so relaxing, don't you agree? So because there's two of us, we're going to paint simultaneously. So she will be dealing with the cross. And the first color she's going to put on our cross is brown as our base. And then we will work in some mixes of gray and white to add that touch of aged wood to our cross. this very beautiful blue here. Actually have these, so we're going to go with them. You could start, you could make them. So we're pretty much finished with this guy. Take it from, I'm just going to create an artificial. Yep. Got a very beautiful shade of blue, and we're going to complement that with our green here. And for the base, we are going to do different shades of green. So we're going to work with a very dark green, and then for our grass stalks, we're going to do sort of a lighter shade of green, or a primary green, I should say. And we'll incorporate some different shades of green to indicate that there are different kinds of plants that are growing at the foot of the cross. And the reason I'm putting in the plants is because I feel the plants sort of signify the life that comes from the cross. It signifies the new life in Christ. I'm going to start working on the clouds. Now to do the clouds, I'm going to use what we call a round shape brush. I won't screen with this. And I'm just going to create little semicircles. These are not going to be perfect clouds by any means. They are going to be more, I guess, sort of more abstract shapes. Try to make them as simple as I can. Unfortunately, I'm not able to do very realistic clouds just yet. It's Teacher Jones' forte. But hopefully, we'll get some nice clouds. So, to get the clouds, I'm just going to sort of dab little shapes, little semicircle shapes. tips, I'm going to add more white so that the very, very tips are going to be the brightest. And then towards the centers, I will sort of blur them out a little. Grass is looking very grassy. Right now I'm just sort of doing like a base shape of the clouds. Making it a little bit lighter over the horizon. And I'm also going to use the same brush to do some flowers. And I'm really hopeful that it works out. Like this, like a clamshell. Yeah, like the shape of your fan brush. I'm gonna come back in here because I want to add in some more definition with my clouds. You can start in here. So we're going to swap jobs for a little bit. She's going to do some clouds, and I'm going to see if I can get some grass clumps in here. And don't worry if you don't think it's coming out perfectly. The point is that we're trying to convey a message here. It doesn't have to be perfect. It's just you would like when people look at it that they understand what you were trying to convey. Once you've got that done, you've succeeded. So don't worry about whether it looks as grass-like as you would like it. That comes with practice. Just enjoy the process. We will put some grasses that will be at the base of the cross as well. leave your brushes for a very long time or overnight in your water. If not, it will loosen the glue that holds it together. May I have the cloud color? So we're going to come back in and do some more work on our clouds, because what I would like to do is to show sort of little areas where some areas are a little bit brighter, perhaps, you know, where the sun is hitting it. That's the other thing, is we haven't really established where our light source is. I'm thinking probably overhead, so and from the, what side is this, the left? So we'll have a bit of illumination to this side of our cross. You could start now working on the cross itself, so we can take the cross off. There we have our silhouette. Looks pretty good. And what you're going to want to do now is start with a basic brown. Try as best you can. As best you can not to go outside the lines of your stencil. You can use your fan brush, because that will give you those sort of scratchy lines, or any brush that you like. But you want something that's going to give you texture and looks a bit more like wood. For my clouds, I'm going to go back in with a tiny drop of primary blue. And I'm going to sort of do a little bit of highlighting in certain areas to bring out the lighter areas. So the darker areas will bring out the edges of the lighter areas. So of course, one of the best things to do is to allow your painting to dry between stages. So, you know, ideally what we would want is for the cross to dry, and then we would come back in with the other layers that we're going to be adding. So you could probably stop with the brown right there. And then we're going to come back in with some gray. I'm still working on my clouds. I'm just going to bring back in a bit more white. Alright, so while we are waiting on our cross to dry, we're going to start adding in some longer stalks and putting our flowers on those. So again, we can use our fan brush for that. And to make the shade of stalk, you can use your fan brush, but I'm actually going to switch over and I'm going to use what we call a liner brush, or one that's got, it's a bit thinner, so that we can get some good stalks, hopefully. Bring up a few stalks like this. Give them some leaves. Remember, your stalks start thicker at the bottom. Then I went ahead and made mine too big. I'm just going to add a few leaves. see some very beautiful work coming out of this painting. So now that we've got that dark green, what we're going to do is we're going to come back in with our primary green again, because we want to show that some areas have darker shades than others, as I mentioned before, as in, oh, where we go, grass. So for our cross, we can start working on that. So you'll need to make gray, which of course is a mix of black and white. Mix it into the darker areas. So just going across some of the areas that are dark, bringing that color up. Again, ideally, it's always great if you can wait for it to dry before you do this. But in the interest of time, we're going to go ahead and start putting this in. I should mention that you don't want to put too much paint on your fan brush when you're doing it. If you do and you find like it's maybe going a little too heavy one color, you can just clean off the brush and take a darker color. So like either your dark gray or your black, and then go over it again. But you want sort of two ways. You can either mix it with your original color, or so I'm good. You know, I can mix it with the magenta color, and then I'm going to go back over sort of like the tops. Brush on the canvas. I'm not doing too much pressing for these types of flowers that I'm doing. And again, these are just more about the shape of flowers, the suggestion of flowers versus actual detailed flowers. We are almost done. If you want to get more detailed with your flowers, you can also add centers or hearts to them. And if we were perhaps doing this close-up, I would, so that you could see. And in retrospect, now I'm thinking maybe what I'll do is give a few of them the white hearts, so that you can see them much more clearly. Now, of course, not all of your flowers have to be facing you. Some of them can be just on the side, facing away. All right. So, yeah, so our final thing will be, I'm going to add some little white centers to them. Hopefully it will show up. You might have to zoom in there for me.
Mm-hmm.
Add a little white center. You can do white centers, and then you can put little green dots around them, and that will also highlight them and make your flowers more detailed. So I'm sure this is making these flowers really pop now. And if you want to get really detailed, then what you can do is highlight your flowers to show the direction of the sun. And to do that, you would just take the original color. So for example, in my case, I chose magenta. So you take the original pink or magenta, add white to that, and then sort of come around the very edge of your flower to show where the sun is hitting. So the way I've done these, are too tiny, so it wouldn't really show up, but that's another thing that you can do. And we are through. So because both Dominique and I did this, we're gonna sign it together. Now, if you wanted to, you could also have drawn a line around the cross with the flowers going up that way as well, if you so chose. I think for this, we're going to leave it simple because, as I said, I really wanted the focus to be on the cross. So I'll sign it and then you can sign it. How big, how much further, how far out did you zoom out for us?
Just about here.
Okay, so we're coming like this. So we hope that you enjoyed doing this very simple, hopefully simple, but lovely painting. And we want to thank you so much for joining us, and we hope that we will see you next time. In the meantime, I just want you to, as you look at your painting, that you would reflect on what it means to be a servant of Christ, a servant who follows the cross, and what it means when he says to pick up your cross and to follow him. But then he also says that his yoke is easy, his burden is light. So we know we have the Holy Spirit inside of us helping us to walk this Christian life and to carry our cross. So thank you so much for joining us, everybody, and we will see you next time. God bless you. We love you.
Happy New Year and welcome to season 18 of ECCB Connects. Have you started making plans about how you'll improve your financial health and wellness in 2022 and beyond? We kick off this season by speaking with Assistant Professor at the Utah Valley University, Dr. Terrence Martin Jr., about how you can work on making 2022 a financially healthy and productive year. Stay connected. We'll share more with you after this short message.
The Eastern Caribbean Central Bank is rolling out Dcash, the next step in the evolution of the EC dollar. Use Dcash to send and receive money to and from friends and family. Make payments directly from your smart device. Make payments from wherever you are. Download the app from the Google Play or Apple Store and sign up, or visit dcashec.com for more information. The future of the EC dollar is digital. Let's make history together.
Dr. Martin, welcome to ECCB Connects.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to participate in this series.
Great. And we want to say Happy New Year to you. It's the start of 2022, a year that people start off with big dreams, promises, hopes, and dreams.
I think the world is cautiously optimistic after the last couple of years that we've had. So Happy New Year to everybody, and season's greetings to all.
Yes, and as you said, we know we've been through a topsy-turvy last 2 years, to say the least, with everything that's happened with COVID and the economic and financial fallout as a result. And as you know, the new year is often a time when people reflect and think about how they are going to improve on what has gone in the past and be more successful and resilient in the future. So we have New Year's resolutions from, health and education and fitness happening. And in similar sense, we often think about how do we reset our finances to be more successful. There's a concept floating around about financial health. How can we be financially healthy in 2022? And from your perspective, talk to us about what is the definition when we speak about financial health? What are we talking about?
So financial health is almost like a subset of financial literacy, but in short, it's used to describe the way in which someone's managed their money affairs or their monetary affairs. And there's different dimensions, right? There are different areas. You could focus on the type of savings that you have, your approach to things like retirement. your approach to things like how you deal with credit. Are you going to pursue things like home ownership? What are your views on investing? So there are several dimensions of financial health. And, you could put them in several buckets, right? Money management, how you address borrowing, how you deal with investing, and then how you protect it all in terms of things like insurance and estate planning, things like that.
So having said that, what are some of the signs that we look for when we think about an individual who is financially fit and healthy? How would I checklist that I'm on the right track?
So in financial planning, there are certain heuristics that we tend to go by, right? If I was meeting with a client, or if I'm teaching a class and engaging students, I ask things like, do you have an emergency fund? Do you have access to a retirement plan? What percentage of your salary are your savings? Now, these are all relative, right? And these are specific to age. For example, if you're younger, you don't need to save as much. Let's say you're 25, you don't necessarily need to save as much as someone that's like 45, right? Because the younger you are, and if you, for example, you're investing, the power of compound interest could actually help you to save less in the long term. If you're a little bit older and you're a little starting out later in terms of things like retirement, then you may have to save more, right? So it's really dependent. It's not like a one cap fits all. That's the thing about anything that's personal finance related, is you have to really look at it from that person's perspective, that person's financial goals. Simple things like having an emergency fund, putting some money away in terms of savings for those types of emergencies, and starting investment, starting to think about the future, and things like retirement. If you're lucky enough to work for an institution that has a retirement plan, you want to participate. So these are some broad checks. There's some ratios that we could use, which may or may not be applicable to the region because of, different tax structures and stuff like that.
Great. So you spoke about looking from an individual standpoint at what you have going on, and then assessing, what it is that needs to be addressed. Let's take a specific case scenario. I'm in my 30s. I've been working for a number of years. I don't have any funds set aside, and particularly I've been impacted income-wise because of COVID. So I'm coming from a less than optimal income earning situation, but I want to start getting financially healthy. Okay. What are some recommendations you would make to help an individual get on track?
We first need to know where that individual is, right? So things like drafting personal financial statements, there are tons of free templates online, looking at what's really your cash flow at the end of the month, at the end of the year, because we need to know where we're starting from, right? And then we also want to clue into the net worth, what's your wealth status? And if you're in your 30s, it's okay if you have a negative net worth. You have 30 plus years to counter that, right? So that means it's okay if you have more debt than you have assets, because in our 30s, according to something called the life cycle hypothesis, which basically means how can we be happy over our lifetime? It's okay as a younger individual, when just starting out in our 30s, that's when we're accumulating things like homes, businesses. So that's all right if your net worth is negative. So we want to start there, right? And after we see that, then we come up with some plans, a financial goal. We can't take you anywhere into the future without knowing exactly where you are, or without having a plan. Because if what's the saying? If you don't have a plan, you plan to fail, right? So from there, we establish some financial goals. One, and you prioritize those goals, right? Okay, so if I'm looking at someone in their 30s, I'm engaging them, I'm asking them, what's most important to you? So let's take it, for example, emergency fund. After coming out of COVID, one of the biggest things I saw, even all over social media, is people not being able to afford necessities, right? And some people call it saving for a rainy day. All right, so what do we look at? We look at what's your monthly expenses, right? The fixed expenses versus variable expenses, discretionary versus non-discretionary. And we try to at least put in place 6 months of expenses in an account that we don't touch. Let's call that savings. So we start there. So we develop a plan to reach to that point, okay? Unfortunately, what COVID also brought with it was a lot of mortality issues. It showed the vulnerability in some cases of, health and so on. So then maybe looking at insurance, life insurance, that would be in some cases a quick and cheap fix. I always say life insurance is how we could break the poverty cycle. Because, for example, in one policy, you could change generations behind you, right? So then some people might say, well, I don't need life insurance. I don't really have anything, blah, blah, blah. If you have kids, even if you have parents, if you have siblings, that's something that you could help, right? You could help in terms of paying off debt. And here's the thing, you could actually own life insurance on somebody else, right? So if you have an elder in your family, that's one ways in which you could
preparing for
exactly. It could be somewhat of financial arbitrage in that way. So I would start there. I would start by looking at their cash flows, looking at their net worth, developing financial goals around that they want to do. Because if they don't want to have these goals, it doesn't matter what you recommend, they won't do it. Build an emergency fund, start with insurance, even things like putting a will in place, especially if you have kids. These are things that largely the estate planning aspect could be a little costly, depending on the country that you're in, but these are things that we have to put in place to safeguard. And then from there, we could do anything else. If we have money left over, we have a decision. Do we consume this? Do we pay down debt? Or do we save it? And I would like to echo here that paying off debt is a form of savings, because by paying off debt, you're actually saving that interest that would have accumulated over the life of the debt. So it's actually a form of saving. So if we wrap our mind around that, then we start to develop strategies. All right, let's get debt free. That's one way. Or let's start to invest, and the decision really comes down to what's the better return on my money. If I'm going to get 10% by investing, or I'm going to save 20% on debt. At the end of the day, paying off the debt will actually benefit you more in this case than investing.
It's interesting that you said that about debt, because another question that comes to mind thinking about financial health and wellness is saving versus paying debt. And we often hear that debate, well, if you had money, how would you, direct the funds? So it's really about examining the situation and seeing if I paid this debt off, I actually save money in the long run.
It really is. So I published a paper, I don't think it's out yet, but it was accepted this summer. And looking at credit status, the same question, right? There's some people that have the money in their savings account that could just pay off all their debt today, but they don't, right? So we call those solvent revolvers. Now you have some people that want to pay off the debt, but they can't. We call them insolvent revolvers. And we have people that just live debt free. Great for you, right? But for those two individuals who are solvent and insolvent, it's a real psychological decision. It really comes through. And it goes back to somebody's willingness to sustain financial risk. So if we really establish an emergency fund, for example, then the person with the solvent revolving mentality may be more likely to pay off that debt because they have a safety net in the emergency fund. All right. And then sometimes we look at, okay, with the insolvent individual, do they have the capacity? So what does that mean? If they don't have the capacity to pay it off, maybe then we start to look at things like debt consolidation, right? To make it easier for them, restructuring their debt position. So we have a decision. Once we know your cash flows, we have a decision, especially if it's a surplus, meaning you make more money than you spend. Do we consume it? Or do we save it? And then we need to start to look at saving, as I said, as paying debt versus investing. Now, traditional savings, what's that? Pay like 1% a year, if so much. I know in the US, it's like 0.1%. Now, if you compare that return that you're going to get for every $1,000, you're probably going to make $1 a year versus paying off $1,000. paying off $1,000 note with a 20% annual interest, that's saving $200, right? So it's really perspective. And yes, everybody is different, but that's where engaging, having the ability to talk to someone, figuring out their financial goals, short-term and long-term, will go a long way.
Now, Dr. Martin, we've been talking about COVID back and forth, and the reality is persons have been negatively affected income-wise by COVID. So starting out 2022 on an optimistic note is difficult in itself. Mm-hmm. So what do you say? What advice in terms of getting financially healthy would you give to someone who is either unemployed or getting back on their feet, has debts to take care of? How does that person try to reposition themselves for a good reset?
You're absolutely right. COVID was terrible. A lot of people lost traditional income sources, labor income, but it also showed us the pathway to possibilities. And for the individuals, the resident citizens of Eastern Caribbean, I strongly suggest that, one, we start to realize that the Eastern Caribbean is just a micro aspect of a global world in which we could participate in now, because we have technology. Here we are having an interview over Zoom, right? 10 years ago, this wasn't a possibility. Well, we had Skype or MSN, but it definitely wasn't like this. I've seen so many people on social media, for example, even influencers in the region who have monetized skills. All right, so you're employed in, say, for example, the tourism sector, and you're a bartender, right? And as a bartender and mixologist, over the years, you've developed this craft where you understand flavors, you understand different types of alcohol, for example, and now your hotel is closed. What do? Well, write a book. That's a possibility, right? Write a book, make some videos, put them on YouTube, run some social media campaigns, get your friends and family to chime in. And to write an ebook now, an ebook is like 20 pages, all right? And you could have your special cocktails, you could get out there, you could build a separate brand. And then after that, you start to get some traction, people buy your book, then you could go into merchandising, for example, right? So all I'm saying is leverage your human capital. You have a specific skill set that others don't have, right? Leverage that human capital. Realize that I saw this because I saw a lot of people I know, acquaintances, friends, serve the market. I saw people getting into making hand sanitizers. I saw people getting into making masks, right? If you do have that skill, and if you don't have that skill, join with somebody that does, right? I think what COVID showed is the benefit of collaboration. If we could collaborate and work together and realize that no man truly is an island, I think, we could just be better off.
Dr. Martin, you've shared some very insightful, real information with us about how we can look at 2022 as a time to reset, get financially fit, not just for this year, but beyond. So thank you so much for sharing with us and speaking with us on ECCB Connects.
Thank you for having me.
And now for this week's financial tip.
In these challenging times, it is important now more than ever to set financial goals and use them as your motivation. You can have small or big goals, but remember to be realistic about them. In that way, you will be more likely to achieve them.
We've come to the end of this week's episode of ECCB Connects. Thanks for watching, and be sure to join us next week for another program when we share with you who we are, what we do, and how we serve you.